Next May, that peony by your front steps is going to come up with not one flower bud on it. A 3-foot mound of glossy leaves, deeper green than anything else in the bed, and not one flower. That is not your fault. Garden centers and nurseries in this country sell peonies one way, potted, in bloom, in May, to somebody standing in an aisle holding a flower. Everything that decides whether it blooms again happens after that, and they profit when it fails. Every peony that stops blooming is a customer back at that counter in April. Every crown buried too deep is a replacement sale. Every crown rotted under mulch is $40 in the register. That is just how retail works. Mistake number 3 has a hard deadline on the calendar. Miss it, and you wait a year. Stay for that one. A comment last week, best way to do by zone, Quebec, Canada Zone 4B. So what USDA zone are you in? Comment it. It decides what we cover next. Mistake number 1, cutting the foliage back too early in late summer. It is the first mistake on the calendar. It costs more flowers than any other, and almost every gardener who makes it believes they are doing the plant a kindness. Here is the mechanism, because if you understand this one, you will never make it again. A herbaceous peony flowers in late May and early June, and then spends the entire rest of the growing season doing the actual work of the year. Those leaves are a factory. From the day the last petal drops until the day a hard frost blackens the foliage, that plant is running photosynthesis at full output and shipping the sugars it makes down into the thick, fleshy storage roots below the crown. And here is the part that changes everything. Next spring's flower buds are not made next spring. They are made in August, September, and October on the crown, an inch or 2 under the soil surface, and they are built entirely out of the carbohydrate those leaves send down during exactly those months. When you cut the foliage off in the 3rd week of August because it has gone dull and speckled, and you want the bed to look sharp before company arrives, you're not tidying up a plant that is finished for the year. You are shutting the factory down in the middle of its most important shift. The plant does not die. That is precisely why this mistake survives generation after generation. There is no punishment you can see in August or in September or in October or in March. The peony comes back the following spring looking strong because it has enough stored reserve left to push leaves. What it does not have is enough to fund flowers. So you get a big, healthy, deep green, completely barren clump 8 months later. And by then not one gardener in 50 connects it to a pair of shears and a warm afternoon the previous summer. So why does anyone do it? Because peony foliage looks rough by late summer, and it is supposed to. Powdery mildew films the leaves gray, the edges brown and curl. Peony leaf blotch throws purple-black blotches across the upper surface. The plant stops earning its keep visually right around the time everything else in the border is peaking. And the instinct of every tidy American gardener is to reach for the shears. There is one cut you should make in summer, and people confuse the two, so let me separate them clearly. Deadheading is correct. The moment a peony flower goes over, snip that individual bloom off, cutting the stem back to the first strong leaf below it, and take the spent petals out of the crown, where they collect and hold moisture. That stops the plant from setting seed, and seed production is genuinely expensive in stored carbohydrate the plant would rather spend on next year's buds. So remove the flower, keep the leaves. Deadheading in June is good practice. Shearing the whole clump in August is the mistake. The fix, and the window it has to happen in. Leave every single leaf on that plant until a hard freeze has actually blackened it. Not the first light frost that silvers the lawn, the first real freeze, the one that takes the tissue down to limp and dark. Then cut, and cut low to 1 to 2 inches above the soil. University of Minnesota Extension guidance for northern gardens is exactly this. Cut herbaceous peonies to the ground in fall, after frost, not before. Those stubs matter, by the way. 6-inch hollow stems left standing collect water and rot straight down into the crown. And they are the overwintering site for the disease we are going to deal with at mistake number 5. The dates vary more across this country than most gardeners realize. Zone 3, northern Minnesota and the top of Maine, Your hard freeze lands mid to late September. Zone 4, late September into the first week of October. Zone 5, from Chicago west to Denver, mid-October. Zone 6, the Ohio Valley and eastern Kansas, late October. Zone 7, the North Carolina Piedmont and North Georgia, the first half of November, sometimes not until Thanksgiving. And this is where a lot of southern peony growers go wrong. They cut in September because that is what the books written for the upper Midwest tell them to do. And in doing so, they amputate 6 to 8 weeks of bud building from a plant that is already fighting a marginal climate. Ignore this one, and here is the schedule you are on. A single early cut costs you roughly a third to a half of next year's flower count. Do it 2 years running, and you will get a handful of small, short-stemmed blooms. 3 years running, and you have a foliage plant. The recovery is slow too because you have to rebuild root reserves before the plant will fund buds again, and that takes 2 full, uninterrupted seasons. Festiva maxima, the white double with the crimson flecks that has been in American gardens since 1851 and is still one of the finest peonies you can buy, is the poster child here. Its foliage is big, soft, and mildews early, and it looks worse in August than almost anything else in the bed. Leave it alone anyway. My honest opinion, and I will say it plainly. The tidiness instinct is the single most expensive habit in American perennial gardening, and peonies are where it does the most damage. Same season, different failure. Mistake number 2, feeding your peonies high nitrogen fertilizer in late summer and fall. Peonies are not heavy feeders. That sentence contradicts almost everything you will be told at a garden center counter in September, and it is the truth. A mature herbaceous peony in decent garden soil will bloom beautifully for decades on almost nothing. What it will not tolerate is a hit of nitrogen at the wrong end of the year. The mechanism runs on plant hormones and resource allocation. Nitrogen is the growth signal. It tells a plant to build leaf and stem, and it tells it now. Apply it in late August or September, and the peony obeys. It pushes soft, thin-walled new tissue at exactly the moment it should be shutting foliage production down and diverting everything into root storage and bud initiation. You end up with a plant that spent its September budget on leaves it will lose to frost in 4 weeks instead of on the flower buds it needed to build for May. That soft late growth also does not harden off properly before the first hard freeze, which leaves damaged tissue at the crown going into winter, which is an open door for rot. There is a second, sneakier consequence. Excess nitrogen produces tall, weak, water-filled stems. On a heavy double cultivar, those stems cannot hold the flower. Carl Rosenfield, the deep red double, that is probably the most planted red peony in the country, is already borderline in a wet spring. Feed it nitrogen, and the first thunderstorm in late May will lay every bloom flat in the mud, and a flower on the ground is a flower you did not get. The biggest real-world source of this is not a bag of peony fertilizer. It is your lawn. The fall lawn feeding ritual, that broadcast spreader loaded with a high nitrogen turf blend running back and forth across the yard in September, throws granules 6 to 8 feet past the edge of the grass. If your peonies sit in a border along the lawn, and most American peonies do, they are getting fed whether you intended it or not. Shut the spreader off before you reach the bed or shield it. That one change fixes this mistake for a lot of people. The fix and the timing. If you fertilize peonies at all, do it in spring, not fall, when the red shoots are 2 to 3 inches tall, and use something low in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus and potassium, a 5-10-10 or a 5-10-5 at the rate on the label. A light second application right after the flowers finish in June is optional, and it is the last feeding of the year. After the first week of July, nothing. Missouri Botanical Garden guidance for herbaceous peonies is fertile, well-drained soil and moderate feeding. And moderate is the operative word. What you can do in October, and what actually helps, is spread an inch of finished compost on the soil around the plant, out at the drip line, never over the crown itself. That feeds the soil biology without sending a growth signal. Zone variation matters here more than most people expect. In zones 3 and 4, where the ground can be frozen solid by early November, late nitrogen is genuinely dangerous. because there is no runway for that soft growth to harden. In zones 7 and 8, across the Carolinas and into the lower South, the failure mode is different. The plant is already struggling to get enough cold, and nitrogen keeps it in vegetative mode even longer, which makes a bad situation worse. Ignore this one, and the symptom you will see is not an obviously sick plant. It is a big, lush, leggy, floppy peony with plenty of foliage and a poor bud count. And buds that do form often blast, which means they swell to the size of a pea, turn brown and hard, and never open. While we are here, an opinion that is going to annoy some people, Sarah Bernhardt is the most widely sold peony in the United States, and it is, in my view, a mediocre garden plant. Enormous, heavy, double pink flowers on stems that were never engineered to carry them. In a dry May, it is glorious. In a normal May, it balls up in the rain and lies on the ground. It is sold in enormous volume because it photographs well on a tag. And there are 24 better peonies with the same color and stems that stand. If you're buying this fall, look at Coral Charm, or a Japanese form peony instead. Now, the one I warned you about at the start of this video, mistake number 3, letting a clump get overcrowded and then missing the only window in the year when you can fix it. I promised you at the beginning that mistake number 3 had a hard deadline attached to a specific date on the calendar, and that if you missed it, you would wait a full year for another chance. This is that mistake, and here is the deadline. Peony division and peony planting happen in fall, not spring, fall, and not just any part of fall. The root has to go into the ground early enough that it can push new feeder roots while the soil is still above about 40 degrees, and that takes roughly 6 weeks. Once soil temperature drops below that, root growth effectively stops for the year, and the division goes into winter with nothing anchoring it. So the deadline is 6 weeks before your ground freezes, working backward from your own frost dates. In Zone 3 and Cold Zone 4, the northern tier from Minnesota through northern Maine, that means September 1st to the end of September. Zone 5, Chicago, Denver, southern New England, September 15th to about October 15th. Zone 6, the Ohio Valley through Virginia, October 1st to the first week of November. Zone 7 in the Carolinas, you have until mid-November. If you are outside that window, do not divide. Wait, spring division of a peony costs you 2 to 3 years of bloom because you are cutting the root apart at the exact moment it is trying to spend its stored reserves on this year's flowers, and it never recovers that season. Now the mechanism, which is what makes the deadline worth meeting. A peony clump that has been in the same spot for 12 or 15 years is not simply old. Its crown has become congested, dozens of eyes packed into a mass a foot across, each one competing with the ones beside it for the same finite root reserve. The center of the clump dies out and goes woody. The roots have exhausted the phosphorus and potassium in the soil immediately beneath them, which is not soil the plant can move away from. Bloom count starts dropping around year 10, drops further every year after, and gardeners read that as the plant getting tired. It is not tired. It is crowded. The fix is physical work, and it is worth doing correctly. Cut the foliage down first. Dig a wide circle at least 18 inches out from the crown and a full spade's depth and lift the whole root mass. Hose the soil off so you can actually see what you are holding. Then let the root sit in the shade for 2 to 3 hours because a fully turgid peony root is brittle and snaps, and a slightly wilted one is flexible and cuts clean. Then divide with a sharp knife into pieces carrying 3 to 5 eyes each, with at least 6 inches of storage root attached. 3 to 5 eyes. That number is not arbitrary. Divisions with 1 or 2 eyes will survive, but they take 3 to 4 years to flower, and a division with 8 or 10 eyes is just a crowded plant again. Chicago Botanic Gardens' evaluation work on herbaceous peonies backs up the same fall timing, and their guidance on established plantings is that division is a renewal operation, not a routine chore. Do not do this every 3 years. Every 10 to 15 is right, and some clumps genuinely never need it. Replant the divisions the same day if you possibly can, and prepare the new hole before you ever lift the old plant, because a peony root left lying around dries out fast. Dig 18 inches deep and 18 inches wide. Work a couple of shovelfuls of compost and a handful of bone meal into the bottom third only. Then firm it down hard with your foot and let it settle before you set the root, because loose soil under a peony is how a correctly planted crown ends up 2 inches too deep by February. Water it in once, thoroughly, and then leave it alone. New divisions do not need feeding, and they do not need coddling. Bowl of Beauty, the Japanese form pink with the cream staminode center, bulks up faster than most and tends to want dividing sooner. Heavy old doubles like Duchesse de Nemours can sit undisturbed for decades. Ignore this one and the decline is gradual enough that you will not notice which year it happened. You will simply arrive at a spring 5 or 6 years from now when a clump that used to carry 40 flowers carries 9, and every one of them is smaller. That is the loop closed. And while your calendar is out, tell me your zone in the comments if you have not already. It genuinely decides what we cover next. Which brings us to the mistake that gets made in the same window, with the same shovel, and is even more common. Mistake number 4, setting the crown too deep. If you take one thing from this entire video, take this one, because planting depth is the #1 cause of a healthy peony that refuses to flower. Not disease, not cold, not sun. Depth. A herbaceous peony sets its flower buds, the eyes, on the top of the crown, and those eyes need to sit close enough to the surface to register the winter temperature cycle that breaks their dormancy. The correct depth is 1.5 to 2 inches from the top of the eye to the finished soil surface in cold climates, and 1 inch or less across zones 7 and 8. That is it. That is the whole tolerance. Go to 3 inches and bloom drops sharply. Go to 4 and you get a plant that will make beautiful foliage for 20 years and never flower once. Missouri Botanical Garden states the range as 1 to 2 inches and specifically flags planting too deeply as the common cause of failure to bloom, and that matches what shows up in extension offices every spring. Here is what makes this mistake so persistent. It happens to plants nobody has touched. A peony planted at a perfect 2 inches in 2014 is very often 4 inches deep today, and no one moved it. Soil settles. Mulch goes down every April and never fully breaks down. Earthworm castings raise the bed. Gardeners top-dress beds with 1 inch of compost each spring because it is good practice, and after 10 springs, the peony is buried. The plant did not change. The grade did. The fix, and October is the month to do it. Kneel down and scrape the soil back from the crown with your fingers until you find the eyes. They are the pinkish-red pointed buds sitting on the woody crown, and in October, they are already formed and easy to see. Put an actual ruler on it. If the eyes are more than 2.5 inches down, you have found your problem. Now, do not just scrape a crater around the crown and walk away, because that hole fills with water and freezes and rots the plant. Lift it properly in the same fall window we just covered and reset it at the right height. Build the soil back up under the roots so the eyes finish 1.5 to 2 inches below grade after the soil settles, which means planting them about 1 inch high to start. Zone variation is real, and it runs the opposite direction from what people assume. In Zone 3 and 4, the far northern tier, you want the full 2 inches because those eyes need some soil over them for cold protection. In Zone 7 and 8, across North Carolina, Georgia, and into the lower south, you plant shallower, 1 inch or even 3/4, because herbaceous peonies require several hundred hours below 40 degrees to break dormancy properly, and burying them insulates them out of the chilling they need. NC State Extension's guidance for southern gardeners is exactly this combination. Plant shallow, choose early blooming cultivars, and give afternoon shade. A peony at 2 inches in Minneapolis is correct. The same peony at 2 inches in Raleigh may never bloom. An opinion here, and it is a negative one about a very common purchase. The potted peonies sold in bloom at garden centers every May are, judging by what turns up in extension office questions every summer, potted far too deep more often than not, because a deep pot ships better and looks fuller on a bench. When you plant one, do not use the soil line in the pot as your guide. Wash the top of the root ball off, find the eyes, and set them by the ruler. And if you can, buy bare root divisions in fall from a mail-order peony specialist instead. You can see exactly what you are getting. They cost less, and they establish faster. Now we move from planting to cleanup, and to the mistake that cost people flowers, they can actually watch form. Mistake number 5, leaving diseased foliage on the ground over winter. You cut the peony down after frost, exactly as instructed at mistake number 1. Then you rake the stems into a loose pile at the back of the bed, or you leave them lying where they fell because they will break down over winter anyway, or you toss them on the compost heap. Every one of those is the mistake, and the cost arrives in the second week of May. The mechanism is a fungus called Botrytis peonii and its relative Botrytis cinerea. It is the most damaging disease of herbaceous peonies in the United States, and it does not blow in from somewhere else each year. It overwinters right there in the old stems and dead leaves at the base of your plant as hard black resting structures called sclerotia. In spring, the first warm rain splashes those spores up onto the new red shoots as they emerge. What happens next is unmistakable once you know it. Shoots blacken and collapse at ground level, and flower buds swell to the size of a pea, turn brown and leathery, and dry up without ever opening. That is bud blast, and gardeners across the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley write in about it every single May, thinking it was a late frost. It usually was not. It was last November's leaf litter. The critical point is that this compounds. Every year you leave the debris, the resting population at the base of that plant increases. A peony that had light bud blast 3 years ago and has been cleaned up sloppily since will now lose most of its buds in a wet spring. Peony leaf blotch, Cladosporium peonii, overwinters the same way and follows the same arithmetic. The fix has a window, and it is narrow. When you make the frost cut in the dates we already covered for your zone, cut to 1 inch, not 6, and then remove everything. Every stem, every leaf, and the top layer of old mulch around the crown if leaf fragments are mixed into it. Rake it clean down to bare soil in a 6-inch radius around the crown. Then get it out of the garden entirely. Bag it for municipal pickup or burn it where that is legal. Do not compost it. A home compost pile does not hold high enough temperatures for long enough to reliably kill Botrytis sclerotia, and all you are doing is moving the inoculum to a pile you will later spread on the bed. Dense double cultivars suffer worst because their flowers hold water in the petals and the spent blooms hang on. Festiva maxima and Duchesse de Nemours both belong in that category. If you grow either, this cleanup is not optional. Missouri Botanical Garden lists sanitation, removing and destroying infected plant parts, as the primary control for botrytis blight in peonies, ahead of any fungicide. And that ordering matters. You cannot spray your way out of this. You can rake your way out of it. Zone variation is really rainfall variation. Anywhere with a cool, wet spring. And that means Western Oregon and Washington, the Great Lakes states, upstate New York and New England, botrytis pressure is high. And this cleanup is the single highest value hour you will spend in the fall garden. In dry spring country, eastern Colorado, New Mexico, much of the Intermountain West, pressure is lower, but the sclerotia still overwinter, and one wet May will find them. Ignore this one, and next spring, you will get a beautiful mound of foliage and a scattering of hard brown buds that never open, which is arguably more frustrating than getting no buds at all. Before we move on, if you have not put your zone in the comments yet, do it now. It decides what we cover next. Mistake number 6 is the one nobody sees happening, because it happens at about a foot a year. Excessive shade from trees and shrubs that have grown in around the plant. Herbaceous peonies want 6 or more hours of direct sun. Below about 4 hours, they will persist indefinitely, produce perfectly good foliage, and stop setting flower buds. They will not die, they will not look sick, they will simply go quiet. Missouri Botanical Garden's culture note for herbaceous peonies is full sun to part shade, with the working reality being that full sun is what produces flowers, and part shade is what the plant will tolerate without them. The reason this mistake is invisible is arithmetic. The red maple you planted along the property line in 2009 was 15 feet tall. It is 35 feet now with a canopy spread of 30. The peony bed that got 7 hours of sun for its first 8 years now gets 3.5, and the change came in increments so small that no single year looked different from the last. The gardener notices the bloom count falling and reasons that the plant is old, or the soil is depleted, or last winter was hard. There is a second half to this that gets overlooked. Trees do not just take light, they take water and nutrients, and they take them most aggressively in late summer, which is exactly the window when the peony is trying to provision next year's buds. A peony sitting inside the root zone of a mature maple or a row of arbor vitae is competing for resources in the same 8 weeks it most needs them. That is why peonies under trees decline faster than the light reduction alone would predict. The diagnosis and the timing. Late summer and early fall are the right time to assess this because the canopy is at full leaf and you are seeing worst-case shade. Go out on a clear day and physically check the bed at 9 in the morning, at noon, and at 3 in the afternoon, and write down whether the crown is in direct sun each time. Do not estimate from memory. Everybody overestimates their sun by 2 hours. And do not only look up. Foundation shrubs are the quieter half of this problem. A row of boxwood or a hydrangea that was 2 feet across when it went in can be 5 feet across now, leaning over the peony from the side and cutting the morning sun that matters most. And because it is at eye level, nobody ever registers it as shade. Then the fix is a dormant season job, which is why it sits here in the calendar. You have 2 options and one of them is usually right. Option 1, limb up or thin the offending tree, which you do between late fall and late winter when it is dormant. Raising a canopy by removing the lowest branches can return 2 or 3 hours of morning sun to a bed. Option 2, and this is the one I would choose most of the time, move the peony. Fighting a 35-foot maple for a peony's benefit is a losing campaign that you will have to refight every 4 years. Lift the clump in your fall window, divide it while it is out of the ground, and put it somewhere with open sky to the south and east. Zone variation flips this advice at the bottom of the map. In zones 3 through 5, from Minnesota to New England, give herbaceous peonies every hour of sun you have all day. In zones 7 and 8, in Georgia, the Carolinas, and Texas, light afternoon shade is actually an asset. It keeps flower color from bleaching on cultivars like coral charm, and it extends the life of each bloom by several days in heat. Morning sun, afternoon shade is the southern formula. It is not the northern one. Ignore this one, and the arc is 3 to 5 years of steadily declining bloom followed by a plant that flowers once every second or third year, and eventually not at all. And it is fully reversible, which is the good news here, because unlike depth or division, this mistake does not damage the plant. Put it back in sun and it will bloom the following spring or the one after. And if your zone is not in the comments yet, add it. It decides what we cover next, which leaves the last mistake. And it is the last thing you will do in the peony bed this year. Mistake number 7, mulching over the crown for winter. This is the piece of advice that gets repeated in more American garden columns than any other. And for herbaceous peonies specifically, it is wrong. And I want to be blunt about that because people follow it in good faith and lose flowers for it. Piling 4 to 6 inches of shredded bark or chopped leaves over a peony crown in November to protect it from cold is not protection. It is 3 separate injuries at once. Injury 1, peonies require cold. They need several hundred accumulated hours below 40 degrees for the buds on the crown to break dormancy normally and produce a full-length flower stalk. Insulating the crown from winter reduces the chilling those eyes receive. In zone 3 through 5, there is enough cold that a heavy mulch will not fully defeat it. But in zone 6 and especially zone 7, it absolutely can, and the result is short stems, aborted buds, and uneven emergence. Injury 2, moisture. A thick organic mulch sitting directly on a peony crown holds water against it through every winter thaw and every spring rain. Peony crowns are woody and slow to dry, and that is the condition crown rot and botrytis want. This is the same fungal population from mistake number 5, given a warm, damp blanket to work under. Injury 3, and this is the one that connects back to the single most important mistake on this list. Mulch raises the grade. 4 inches of bark applied every year, partially decomposing, is how a peony planted correctly at 2 inches ends up 4 inches deep by the time it is a teenager. You are recommitting mistake number 4 in slow motion, 1 November at a time. So here is what to actually do. For established herbaceous peonies in zones 5 through 8, do not winter mulch them at all. Nothing over the crown. Clean, bare soil. If you mulch the surrounding bed for weed control, keep it pulled back at least 6 inches from the crown in a clean ring. There is exactly one legitimate exception, and it is narrow, newly planted divisions in their first winter only in zones 3 and 4. A first-year division has not anchored itself, and freeze-thaw cycles can physically heave the root out of the ground. For those and only those, put down 2 to 3 inches of loose straw or evergreen boughs. And here is the part everyone gets wrong. Apply it after the ground has already frozen in late November or December, not in October. The point is to keep the soil frozen and stable, not to keep it warm. Then remove it completely in early spring as soon as the frost is out of the ground and before the red shoots push, or it will do all 3 injuries listed above. University of Minnesota Extension frames winter mulch for peonies as a first winter measure for new plantings that comes off in spring, not an annual practice, and that distinction is the whole thing. At the far south end, zones 8 and warmer, the entire problem inverts. There you are not trying to moderate cold, you are trying to accumulate it, and the answers are choosing early blooming, low chill cultivars, planting the eyes barely under the surface at 1 inch or less, and keeping the crown clear of anything that insulates. Ignore this one, and the failure is quiet. The plant emerges late, the shoots are uneven. Some come up blind with no bud at all, and the crown gets a little softer and a little deeper every year until one spring it simply does not come up. That is the failure that turns into a replacement sale in April, which is where we started. So that is the sequence, and notice that every one of these 7 happens between August and December, months before you would ever think to blame them. Leave the foliage until hard frost. Keep the nitrogen away from the bed after the first week of July. Divide in your 6-week fall window or wait a year. Get a ruler on the crown and set the eyes 1.5 to 2 inches down, less in the south. Strip every scrap of old foliage out of the bed and destroy it. Give the plant 6 hours of sun or move it, and leave the crown bare through winter. Do those 7 and a peony will outlive you. That is not an exaggeration. There are herbaceous peonies flowering in front of farmhouses across Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska that were planted before World War I and have never been divided, fed, sprayed, or mulched. They are still blooming because nobody interfered with them at the wrong time of year. One last thing while we are on it, and then I will let you go. Tell me your zone in the comments if you have not yet. Zone 4, B, Zone 6A, Zone 8. Whatever it is, put it down there, because it decides what we cover next on this channel, and there are zone-specific videos on peony cultivar selection coming that depend entirely on what those comments say. And if this saved you a season of flowers, subscribe.